Hello, hello to my True Blue crew. It is so good to be back with you on Wednesday evening. This is my dedicated sewing time. I protect this hour as best I can to just sew. A lot of times I am sewing my own designs, the projects that make me happy. And today I've got a little bit of homework because I entered quilts in my local guild, and the show is in on March 9th, 18th and 19th, but I need to get them ready to drop off because my guild, my local chapter is a drop off point. So there's a couple gals who are gathering all of the submissions from our local group and taking them to the state display. And then we'll be, people get together to do the pickup and all that other kind of stuff. But in order to turn my quilt in, it needs to have a hanging sleeve. And if you have never dealt with hanging sleeves, they're their own special thing in the quilt world. So I'm going to be talking through that process here tonight. It's so great to see everybody here, and hello to my replay viewers. I know this is a hard time just at the end of the workday for most of the country here in the United States, but drop your name and say hello in the comments. I love to know who is out there. So this seems like a little more of a conversation. And let me know if you have a local guild and if they put on a quilt show and what that experience has been like for you. Hello, Lori. Good to see you. So as I said, hanging sleeves are one of the items that are necessary for quilt shows because usually they have the pipe and drape for any convention center type place that you've ever been at. But they like to hang the quilts on a hanging rod. So you need to have some kind of pocket there on your quilt so that it can attach to this. Here in my home, if I'm putting a quilt up to take pictures or something, I just use shower clips or pants hangers that have the clips on them. But that's not very attractive at a show for everything on display. You like those quilts to just be kind of invisible hanging there. So there is a commercial product called Quilter's Hang Up, and you can find this product in most quilt stores, and you can probably find it online. I'll look after the live and drop a link for folks to find this quilt hang up. And it's a pre-sewn sleeve. Well, I was a little bit silly, and I grabbed this that had been in my drawer for a while, and I took the smaller of the two quilts that I'm entering to my sewing night, and I chopped up the bit that I needed for that smaller quilt. Well, of course, now the rest is not big enough for the big quilt that I'm also entering in the show. So I had to go to the interwebs and find instructions for the 4-inch hanging sleeve. And so that's what I've done. I grabbed this fabric that has been in my stash forever, and luckily there was enough that I could get the length that I needed. And they have you roll the raw edges over and do a little hem there so that that pocket edge is all finished. And then you just sew it in a tube, and I'm going to press this seam. They have you do a wide seam, and I'm going to press that open here on the back of my sleeve. So that's the next step. And Jess popped in to say hello. Good to see you. You've got some experience with sending quilts off to quilt shows. How did you do the sleeves? Did they need a hanging sleeve on yours, Jess? And some, you know, if you plan ahead, if you know you're making a quilt that's going to be at a show, you can sew the sleeve into the binding, and that saves you quite a bit of effort. I'm going to have to sew all 4 sides, and this is a long quilt. So but I've got the premiere of Survivor tonight, so that will be something to keep me entertained as the commercials get very, very tedious. We were first in, and I don't know if it was a local area or if this was a nationwide ad, but during the Olympics, we kept seeing an ad for Jungle Law, and it was so bad. It was, they were trying to get harassment cases of people who had dated their boss and then had been fired. So I'm just like, really? Are we still doing this in 2021? That was all the big scandals in the 90s was those sexual harassment claims. Not that I discount any, you know, human nature being what it is. There's always going to be issues, I think. So the hanging sleeve is kind of a chore, but if you're going to have your quilts on display, it's kind of necessary. And then if it's, you know, if it's hand sewn on, then you can just unpick those stitches and take the hanging sleeve off, and then it would be a regular bed quilt or whatever you wanted. And then the next thing they do is, or the next thing they tell you to do, this end isn't laying very flat, so is they tell you to fold over a little flap so that when the, and then you'll sew here, so you have a loose edge along your sleeve. And that means, because this top edge is sewn down, when they put the pole in there, there's a gap. There's some slack that the pole can take up, and your quilt will hang nicely. And so I'm just ironing that crease in so that I can hand stitch this down on the back of my quilt. I guess that's called a gusset, to put that fold in there that can then pop out over the pole, give it a little more room. But yeah, this is so tedious that I'm just kicking myself that I didn't think to do the large quilt first, or at least measure and make sure that I had enough. Because even if I had to make a hanging sleeve for the smaller quilt, you know, it would have been less hassle because it was smaller. But I didn't plan that. So okay. So now that I've got this whole thing done, I can attach it to my quilt. This is a quilt called Fireworks that I designed a couple years ago. It was in the Island Boutique catalog a year ago, and I'm digging for safety pins is what I need, and I knew I had a whole big thing here of safety pins so that I can pin the sleeve. I'm going to use some straight pins as well, because those safety pins, they may leave a big okay, that's hanging over, so okay, trying to get this all lined up here. When you don't have a table that's quite long enough. Okay, that worked. Okay, so it's not matching fabric, but that's what the sleeve will look like on the back of the quilt. Well, got this, yeah. I think I will just give up. This part is prepped, and I can, take it to the couch or my bedroom where I can spread out a little bit. But this little area for a big twin size quilt is not gonna work. But over the weekend, I cut out 2 more blocks for my Quilt of Valor project. So that is going to be much more fun if I can find if these are all the pieces. Did I really only need? Oh, they're all buried under there. Okay. So down to sewing. How is everybody now that I've got my hanging sleeve situation all taken care of? I just feel like I'm so boring. There's no chat going on. But hopefully everybody is happy and doing their thing, whether that is making dinner or sewing somewhere. I've got these luscious Tonga batiks, I think they were from Timeless Treasures. Pretty red. And then the main focal fabric was these cute flags. So we are doing, there's like spool blocks, but the two ends of the spool are different colors. So that's why I have the red and the blue here. That's out of the camera frame. So so we're putting these little rectangles on both sides of my squares. So some nice chain piecing. And I've got a little cat asleep under my sewing table. And we have really warmed up here in Arizona. We're expecting 90 degrees this weekend. So I've got the ceiling fans running. I'm in shorts and a t-shirt. So the topic of conversation, both with some of my quilty friends and some of my work buddies, was all about AI. And I have not used AI for any quilt design yet, but I'm hearing how some people will have the AI platform assistant, whatever, the generative agent, help them with color schemes, with design ideas, interpreting a picture in a certain style that they can then use for applique or foundation paper piecing or something. And it just is really interesting. I've got so many things going on that I haven't taken the time to play around. with AI much. I've used it a little bit for the social media aspects of my business. Writing some Etsy listings, for example, and analyzing my website and generating YouTube title ideas. But, and I work for state government, and we're not really allowed to use AI tools on the job. So, which is a bummer because it's very useful for some of the design and training materials that I'm responsible for updating. Hello, Agnes. Good to see you. So we were having just a really interesting discussion about where AI shows up. And, it's one of those things, it's here, it's embedded in our lives. So we need to figure out best practices and definitely keep the human oversight in it, because the AI can do the job, but if it only has if it has a 30% error rate, is that acceptable? And if its errors are so egregious that you can't live with even 10% mistakes, then, maybe figure out a different way to use AI. Because when I hear from some business consultants about AI, they're cautioning how we only look at the benefits of it. We can do the job so much faster with AI, and we're not really taking responsibility for any of the mistakes along the way. So just really, really interesting philosophical considerations for the way the world is moving these days. Well, I was trying to sew across my thread tab, and I only got the very tiny edge of it. So that wasn't very, very effective. So like I said, it's getting up into the 80s here, and I know I have a lot of quilting friends on the East Coast, and I think you're still getting snow and haven't dug out from last weekend's storm yet. Crazy, crazy. Let me pull my iron in closer so I can see everyone. So here is step 1 of my block with this blue and red fabric next to a blue and red. We're not going to have a whole lot of contrast, but it is what it is. And I think my daughter just got home and shut the door. So how many quilt projects do you have going on right now? I've got, obviously, this Quilt of Valor. I've got another project with curves that's, I've got half the rows put together. So all the main piecing is done. I'm at the final stages of that. I've got my scrappy jelly roll project. So that's 3 in an arm's throw here. And then I've got my 2 cotton cuts mysteries. So now we're up to 5. And I've got dozens of finished quilt tops that I have not put on the long arm. So you would think I would just need to find a stopping point for the piecing and go work at the long arm, but that bug has not hit yet. Okay, so now I'm taking my rectangles and we're going to put little squares on each end. And I'm going to sew the diagonals so they make that like the trapezoid for the spool. And I don't need to mark these. I can, I mark my machine. You can find some of the tape that you can put down. I just used a Sharpie right on the bed of my machine. And so I've got a long straight line down from my needle. And I can just place the square on that and get it lined up under my needle. So that is how I handle that. Hello, Rita. How are you? My Southern Arizona buddy. I was getting a quilt ready for the Arizona Quilters Guild show, but I don't have enough of a workspace here, so I gave up on that project, and I am working on my Quilt of Valor project. Amanda's here. Hello, hello. You were doing some fabric organizing last night, I saw. Very motivational. I did a bunch of that last year, made some space in my room, and then stalled out, and I've got more to do. So what size quilts do you all like to make? I love a 60 by 70. That's about my sweet spot for making. And it's a nice quick finish on the long arm. A little bit smaller than a twin, but it's I just think that's the best size. So then when I made the quilt that I showed earlier that I'm putting in my local show, it's 66 by 90. And that just seems, since it's so much longer than it is wide, it seems an odd size to me. But I guess if you had it like in a dorm room or something, or for a tall man, it would be great, because you've got the length there to definitely reach the foot of the bed. But I have a friend who likes to make what I consider queen size quilts, 80 by 90-ish. So when I get I work on something for her and then go back to my 60 by 70, they seem very small. But I was listening to Sean over at The Guy Who Sews, and he says he just finished one that was about 60 by 70, and he thought it was huge. So I guess it's all in what size project you're used to. If you're used to making baby quilts that are 30 by 40, then 60 by 70 will be almost double that. So yeah, that seems a lot bigger. Okay, so I've got my red pile done with their little blue corners. And then I have to, these are going to go under the machine the opposite direction, because they're making those like rooftop blocks where the angles are opposite. And it's so handy to have some kind of little thread cutter when you are chain piecing. So there was an interesting ad that popped up on my Facebook feed from a local library. They're having a how-to festival, and they're looking for all kind of makers and crafters to do demonstrations and things. And I'm tempted, but it's one of those things I don't really have. I mean, I suppose I could funnel people to my in-person beginner quilt class, but that's one of the things you have to think about if you're doing anything to monetize your quilting is what does that kind of, what's the next step after you introduce yourself to someone, they see what you have. Are you selling at a craft show and then you're going to be at other craft shows? Can you direct people to your website? So I'll probably let this opportunity go by. I've just been really busy with my day job and haven't felt like putting that much energy in the business side of my quilting other than showing up here with all you wonderful quilters. But speaking of opportunities, I am part of the Quilters Paradise Summit. You can find a link in the video description to register and get your free ticket. It's a 5-day event with 5 or 6 speakers every day, so you get a lot of quilting content, all free workshops. Come and enjoy and see a lot of, different techniques, see what people are doing out there. Lots of goodies. Okay, so you can see with the white stitches there. That's what I mean by a rooftop. You've got both diagonals pointing inwards, and that just kind of, when I get that trimmed and pressed, it'll look like that. So would you call that a trapezoid? Is that sparks everybody's memory and they know the geometric term for that shape? Or is rooftop a better descriptor? What would you call that unit? The trapezoid rooftop thing with the 2 triangles on the end. Work at all. No. Trying to take shortcuts and it's not working. It's like there's just a tiny little tail sticking up. And I was afraid it wouldn't get caught. So quickly rethread there. And then I love chain piecing. Okay, now I'm back to my pressing step. My least favorite of all the steps in quilting is the pressing. Okay, here you can see the unit better. So my question, is this a trapezoid or is it a rooftop? Which is more descriptive and which term would help you get those triangles lined up correctly? Some stray threads I need to take care of. I can't believe you guys are so quiet in the chat. You haven't answered any of my questions or discussion topics. Guess everybody's just busy doing their own thing. Thank you for leaving me on in the background. I appreciate it. Next week, we will be back to Cotton Cat's Mystery Quilt time. The first 2 weeks of the month, I work on those mystery quilts. And then I'll bring the Quilt of Valor back in rotation, hopefully get that finished up. And find some other fun, scrappy projects for this spring. Okay, so now we are, let's get myself organized. That's the cutting for the next block. These all need to be trimmed. And I like to use my add a quarter ruler because that 1/4 inch will help on my the extra triangles that I have from this flip and sew corner. So we can line that 1/4 inch right up on the stitches, and then we get some bonus triangles. And I've been having fun with these bonus triangles the last couple of weeks, so got to keep those in the mix. Annette, hello. So glad you could make it. How's that arm feeling? So now, after watching the tedious part where there's not very much pretty show and tell, you can appreciate those tutorial videos and everything that goes on behind the scenes to show, you know, a few seconds of the step that it step by step to make the block, and we edit out all this tedious trimming and pressing and other stuff. That's why it's so fun to be at a retreat, so that you have company for the miserable part. And it's not a terrible chore, but it's a lot more fun to be sewing than trimming. But I've always liked assembly line type activities. I had a job years ago as a receptionist, and I would volunteer on Friday afternoons when it was slow to go file for the accounting department, because it was, you know, it was something different, nice organized system, alphabetical. Or take the change box and roll the coins. That's always been one of my, I should have been a banker. Count all the coins and get them rolled into there. You know, the $10 of quarters, 50-cent penny rolls. Does anybody have jars of pennies sitting around? I know they're not producing anymore, and so many places are going to that rounding up nonsense. Don't forget to look down in the video description and grab the registration link for the Quilters Paradise Summit. It's coming up in a few weeks, and it's all online, and there are replays available, so you can just pick and choose which sessions you want to tune in for. I'm looking over my shoulder thinking I could see the directions for the next step, and I can't. So okay, all my rooftops are trimmed, and let's see, I put my little bucket of scraps right here, so I can just take all of these paired half square triangle units and dump them in there and save that for another leader ender project sometime. So the way this block is going to turn out is we have our section there, and we will have these two rectangles go top and bottom. And this is part of the Stellar Starburst pattern. It was a kit a while ago that I think the copyright on the pattern is 2018. So it was in my friend's closet for quite a while, and I'm finishing it up for her. So that's all I have time for tonight. Thank you all for hanging out here on our Wednesday Sew and Chat, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day, evening, weekend until we meet again. Take care. Happy quilting.